To sketch in Shaper 3D is a very simple and intuitive process, and it's actually very similar to doing a hand sketch on a piece of paper. So first, I can notice I have a number of sketch tools over on the left-hand side. So if I tap and jump into Sketch, here I have a number of my sketching tools. By default, I'll jump into the Line Arc tool, which, as the name suggests, will draw a line or an arc. This is probably one of the most common sketching tools. We have a number of other sketching tools available as well, and we're going to go through those later on. However, starting with the Line Arc tool, I can simply just draw a line, and notice a line coming in on my screen here. And to get rid of this in the bottom left-hand corner, I can notice an undo, so I'll just tap on undo to remove that line. I'll also just close out of these sketch tools. What's also important to note is that I don't actually need to jump into my sketch tools every single time. If I was to just draw a line, notice it's automatically jumped into those sketch tools and that line arc tool and automatically drawn that line for me. And again, I'll just undo and close out. Now, as we can see, we've been kind of sketching here in a 3D view, but a lot of times we'd like to jump to a 2D view to do most of our sketches. So for example, if I want to sketch on my top plane, I can jump to my specific top plane or top view. And now I'm sketching on more of a 2D view, which would be more similar to sketching on a piece of paper on a table, for example. Now let's say instead of a line, I would like to draw an arc or a circle. So again, just use the hand motion how you would hand sketch an arc or a circle. So I'll just use the motion to sketch out a circle here. Notice it's automatically changed from a line to now an arc. And if I close that arc all the way out, it becomes a circle. And that's why it's called the Line Arc tool here, as it's actually the Line tool and the Arc tool. Notice I do have a drop down there as well. I have 3 different types. Automatic is both tools at once. You can either draw a line or an arc, depending on your hand motions. However, if you'd like to force it to only be a line or only be an arc, we have those options there as well. In this case, I'll keep it automatic, as I usually do. And to get rid of this circle, again, I could press undo, or I could tap to select and hit delete down at the bottom. Same idea for an arc. Again, use that hand motion of drawing an arc or a circle, and this time just don't close it all the way out. And now, of course, we have an arc. So drawing lines or arcs, very simple process. Again, I'll just undo. Now, a lot of times it might be useful to jump between drawing lines, then drawing arcs, then drawing lines again, and so on. Luckily, we can do this as well in Shaper 3D. So I'll start by just drawing a straight line, for example. But now let's say halfway through I change my mind and want to change this line to be an arc. If I just shake my pencil, notice it is now changed to be an arc. And same idea, if I change my mind again and want to go back to a line, I can just shake my pencil once more, and now I'm back to a straight line. And I'll just tap to select that line, delete. And I'm going to double tap in my orientation cube to jump back to a 3D view. Notice so far we have only been drawing on our top plane or our XY plane. And again, I call it the XY plane. If we take a look at our orientation cube there, we can see our X, Y, and Z axes here. So for example, when I'm in my top view there, notice I see the X and the Y axes there, so those making the XY plane. Versus in my 3D view, I have my right plane would be the ZY plane, as we can see, and my front plane would be the XZ plane, for example. So again, by default, notice my grid is always on that top plane or that XY plane. And if I were to draw in a kind of 3D view here, notice it's always coming in on that top plane or that XY plane, as we can see here. But we do have a few options if we'd like to draw on some other planes. For example, I can take a look at my views options here, and notice by default the grid position is on that XY plane. Hence we're always seeing the grid currently on the XY plane there. But if I'd like, I could change it to that YZ plane. And now if we take a look, I can see that I've just changed my grid to be on my YZ plane, or my right plane in this case. And now if I were to draw anywhere here, notice it's coming in on that right plane or YZ plane. I'll just double tap to jump back to a default view again, and we can see these have been drawn on the two different planes. And just another option to do this, let's say we now wanted to draw on the front plane, or the XZ plane in this case. I could navigate to views and switch my grid position to the XZ plane here, or if I just tap on front in my orientation cube, that jumps me to my front plane, or my XZ plane, and notice the grid has automatically been placed on that plane. And now again I could draw on that plane, and now if we double tap to jump back to a 3D view, we can see I've just drawn on that front or XZ plane. So we can see by default we can really sketch on any of our three default planes there pretty easily: the top plane or the XY plane, the right plane or the ZY plane, or the front plane or the ZX plane. And then I can just tap to select all three of these sketches and delete if I'm done with that. Finally, let's put all this together. So I'll jump to my top view, let's say here, and I'll create a bit of a more complex sketch. So maybe I'll just start by drawing a line somewhere about here, maybe another line somewhere about here, maybe a line here, and something like this. And then finally I want to maybe close it out with an arc. So I'll start with a line here, give it a shake to turn it into an arc, and then close it out. And now we see we very quickly have created some fairly simple sketch. Also notice as I go into a bit of a 3D view, that sketch is coming in as a light blue color. And that's useful. It's just telling me that this is a closed out sketch, meaning that eventually we might be able to create a 3D object from this sketch by using our extrusion or other 3D tools, and we're going to learn more about those later on. In the next few lessons, we're going to learn more about sketching splines, as well as using constraints and dimensions.